SportsGrid live from Las Vegas. I'm joined by guest Adam Malamut. He's the co-host of Eagles pregame for Jacob Sports. Has some great perspective on this weekend's matchup because the Eagles had a chance to play both of these teams late in the season, right, Adam?
Mike, that had a chance stuff hurts, man. That had a chance stuff hurts. This is maybe my most difficult Las Vegas trip. You know, I'm out here to see these two teams play. They earn the right to be here. My Philadelphia Eagles have not earned that right.
Right. So let's talk about the Eagles in general and their season and gain some perspective there, and then talk a little bit about how the Chiefs and 49ers matchup might be. So it was obviously a really unique season, right? They were coming off a Super Bowl loss, so very often a Super Bowl hangover for both teams. But in particular, the team that loses the Super Bowl has a very tough time getting back there. But we saw the Eagles race out to a 9-1 lead, beating the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City on Monday night. But there seemed to be little seeds of evidence that maybe this wasn't the same version of the Eagles. Jalen Hurts a little bit banged up. They started winning these close games against the Commanders, the Dallas Cowboys, and then that Chiefs game, and then it started to unravel from there. Why do you think that happened?
You know, Mike, let me start off by saying, and the Jets fans aren't going to be happy about this, I knew we had a problem when we lost to the Jets.
Yeah.
When you lose, there are certain teams that you're supposed to lose to, or you should be more competitive with. There's certain teams that you should run away with. The Jets team on paper is a young, good team, but the Eagles matched up so much better. And when we saw that game break down,
and the Jets beat them. Like that's really, I think, what you're aiming
they beat,
at, right?
They beat the pulp out of them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, I mean, it was a decisive win. And, you know, the problem that we recognized was at that point, we knew that there was something going on. We didn't know where the failure was. We didn't know whether it was something that was a systemic failure or just some miscues. But then we saw them come in and they beat the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. They beat the Chiefs without Jalen Hurts throwing a touchdown, but he scored 2 rushing touchdowns.
Yep.
DeAndre Swift scored a rushing touchdown. So all 21 of the Eagles' points were on the ground, not through the air. You know, Jalen Hurts in that game only threw for 150 yards. Jalen, I happen to love Jalen. I'm a huge Jalen Hurts fan.
Same.
But he's got an arm, and I think that some of the discord may have come from folks not getting the ball that wanted the ball, and it's good to have a competitive team where everybody wants the ball. But in that game, you know, they played a really well-planned game plan against who I think is probably the best team in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just a couple of weeks later, they had this matchup against the Niners at home, and that's when we knew, okay, if we thought there wasn't a problem at this point, now we know there's a problem because the Niners just ran them over, 42-19 victory.
I will never forget back in the Charlie Garner days, the Eagles running up the score 40 points on the Niners. And, when
payback.
Remember that? That was a long time ago.
Payback from the Charlie Garner days?
The Charlie Garner days, yeah. But the Eagles came out flat in that game, and it was amazing to me because they had every incentive to come out in that game and come out strong, and they just didn't. I mean, from the get-go, they didn't come out strong. You know, Jalen Hurts threw the ball 45 times.
Right.
It's a huge difference from what they did with the Chiefs game where they were successful.
Correct.
He had to because they were getting killed. You know, in the first quarter, the Eagles were up 6-0. Then all of a sudden, the 49ers just run the table. 14 points in the second quarter, 14 points in the third quarter, 14 points in the fourth quarter. They never took their foot off the gas.
That's right.
And here you have the Eagles that are trying to figure out how to get back in the game. They're trying to figure out exactly what it is that they need to game plan and where they're miscuing, and they just couldn't get it together. So Jalen Hurts rushed for 7 rushes in that game. No clock management. You've got the quarterback leading the team in rushing attempts and rushing yards with 20 yards.
Right. So, again, we're with Adam Malamut. He's the co-host of Eagles pregame for Jacob Sports. Yeah, giving us, obviously, a lot of really good numbers here on the Eagles. And Eagles, a team that played both of these teams later in the season. So, final question about the Eagles, and then we'll really focus on Niners and Chiefs. We have Now, coaching changes, right?
Sure.
We have a potential retirement from Jason Kelsey. It's, he's not officially official.
I'm not ready to give up on him yet.
Yeah, so it's not officially official, but I thought the Disney World trip was sort of like, if you had any hope that he might come back, the Disney World trip felt like the final act of an active NFL player. But we also have Johnson being pushed out as the coordinator, and they've made some changes here.
Sure.
What do you suspect will happen with these coordinator changes?
Look, I think what's going to happen is I think that you're going to have the team get re-energized. You're going to have new leadership there. You're going to have a different perspective, and sometimes you just need to hear it differently. Sometimes it's the same message, but from a different voice. And I think that that's what you're going to get initially. The team has to be bought in on their leadership. And one of the things that we talked about on our show, and as you know, I co-hosted with Mark Farzetta and Seth Joyner.
Yeah.
And one of the steady themes has been the leaders have to lead. And I think that if they establish leadership early on and they win over the team and they win over the team's belief, I think that you'll get the productivity that we know they can do. I think 10-1 was an anomaly. This league, there's no team that's really wired to go 10-1. That's a huge jump out of the
without getting some huge breaks along.
Right. And so I mean, we got some breaks and we won some games. I mean, I think that we might be the only team that had a winning record or that kind of winning record with that narrow of a point differential.
Yeah.
So when you start talking about the new coaches coming in, it really falls down on what are these coaches going to do in the locker room? How are they going to lead? And how are they going to get their leaders to lead on the field?
Yeah, so the game that really did it for me was the Dallas game, the game that they beat Dallas. I was like, something is desperately wrong here. I thought the Cowboys were getting too much credit for losing that game closely, but that was the game where I was like, something's wrong. Then they beat the Chiefs, and I was like, all right, maybe they still have it together, do the Eagles, but again, we'll see what happens. Vic Fangio, Kellen Moore. I don't know if that's the best mix, but they're doing it. Sirianni's going to have to take control. So let's take a look at these two teams. You obviously have a team that the Eagles beat and the Eagles lost to. But do you think this Kansas City Chiefs game, as you watch it from a little bit from afar, do you think this Kansas City Chiefs team is different than the one that the Eagles played a couple of months ago?
I do. I think that they're very different. I think they've hit stride. And the one thing that you can't do with players of the caliber that the Chiefs have is let them hit stride. Once they hit stride, it's this snowball effect of success. And I would not want to be the 49ers young quarterback. I love Brock Purdy. I think that he's got a huge future. But, coming in to play a guy with Mahomes' credentials, and I was listening to Brandon Cooks before my segment, and heard him talking about, what he thinks of Mahomes, and I don't disagree. I think Mahomes is a phenomenal quarterback, and I'm not ready to give him one of the best of all time yet. I think he's got some years ahead of him.
Sure.
But he's certainly on a great trajectory. But this team also has a very, very underrated defense. People want to talk about the defensive players in the 49ers. They don't talk enough about the defensive players in the Kansas City Chiefs. So when you have a guy like George Kittle in the Niners, the Chiefs have responses to that. They have people that can get out and cover a guy like that. Christian McCaffrey is going to be the determining factor as to how the Niners go today.
Sure, I agree. Yeah, on
the
Sunday,
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl 58. So I think you're right. I'd concur in saying that you have Chris Jones and George Karlaftis up front. Karlaftis is really showing that he's a great young player, first-round draft pick for them. You have Nick Bolton in the middle, who's racked up, not last week against the Ravens. So the Ravens didn't run the ball all that much, but the previous 3 games, double-digit tackles. Nick Bolton obviously had one of the biggest plays in the Super Bowl last year, where Jalen Hurts dropped the ball and Nick Bolton picked it up and ran it back for a scoop and score. That was a play early on in that game that had a huge impact long term, right? Hurts played a nearly perfect game, but that one drop led to a touchdown that kept the Chiefs close in that first half. So you have that, and then on the outside, look, I think 2 guys that are a huge impact in this game is Greenlaw and Warner, obviously in the San Francisco side, but I've been talking about it all week. Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed and their ability to potentially limit Kittle, but more importantly Ayuk, and possibly limit the explosive plays. I think is really something that's important when we head into this weekend.
Yeah, so Mike, it's interesting. If you look at Super Bowl MVPs over the past 26 seasons, or 26 Super Bowls, 4 times you had a defensive player.
That's right.
4 times. You never had a tight end.
Correct.
But 4 times you had a defensive player. Trent McDuffie is plus 50,000.
I love it.
Plus 50,000, and that's the guy that I'm looking at. He had huge shoes to fill with the Honey Badger leaving, right? And he plays that same type of game. I'm not willing to give him the credentials yet, but he plays that same type of game.
Sure.
He's an exciting guy. He's a game changer. He's a guy who can come out and at any given moment he can shut somebody down. He can lay the wood and hit hard, and he can be somebody who can really affect change. But look, the Niners have a great linebacker core. Warner's awesome. Bosa's awesome. But, they're going up against a guy who I think is going to go down as the best tight end in the history of the game.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about that and your Niners perspective. You've given us some already, but you have Warner and Greenlaw in the middle, Bosa, and obviously some big-name defensive linemen up front. But as you can see, we're live show here. We got a lot of characters out here. I don't mind it. That's part of why we're here, right? People rooting for the Niners and the Chiefs. So Greenlaw and Warner in the middle. What I think is going to be the key for Kansas City is Isaiah Pacheco and trying to get him the ball often, early and often. I like his over on rushing attempts. What do you think is the best way to attack this Niners defense?
So I agree with you with the over because McKinnon's not in. So they're already down a man. And Edwards-Helaire, a lot of people like him. I just don't think that he's the player that people think he is.
Plan at all.
I don't either. And I saw some prop bets.
Pacheco touched the ball 28 times last week.
Right. And the guy's a machine. And, everybody talks about him running angry. I don't know if our viewers really understand what level of anger he runs with. Every step he takes with intention. So I agree. Look, I think that the big advantage is Mahomes isn't going to have to throw the ball. He will throw the ball, but they have the ability to use Pacheco to get out there and to help balance the game plan, balance the time, balance the play clock. I think that the Chiefs being an underdog is kind of crazy on this thing.
He's 10-1-1 against the number is Mahomes against the spread when he's an underdog with 9 outright wins, and in the playoffs as an underdog in his career, 3-0 straight up. So we got just about a minute and a half to go. I want to give you some time. It's a +2 is the spread here. The total is 47.5. Over, under first, and then which team do you like?
Yeah, so I love that you're going +2 because I'm with the Chiefs also, but I take the money line.
Yeah, me too.
So I think that, 2 points is nothing. It's interesting. If you look at the quarters.
+110 on the money line right now, by the way, on the BetMGM app.
What's that?
+110 on the money line on the BetMGM app.
So if you look at the quarters, you add up all the quarters right now, they add up to 44. I think that this is going to be a low-scoring game. The over-under, last time I checked, was 47.5.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I like the under.
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think that San Fran's going to come out. They're going to play hard. It's going to be McCaffrey. McCaffrey's going to eat up a lot of clock. I listen, all day long, I'm Chiefs money line, and I'm parlaying it with the under.
Okay, so there you go. We are simpatico here. Chiefs and the under. I'm aligned with Adam there. Great stuff, as always, from Adam Malamut. You find him down in Atlantic City doing the pregame for the Eagles. He's a co-host for Jacob Sports for their Eagles pregame. Adam, thank you for being here with us.
Thanks
live
for having me.
at BetMGM Sportsbook. Right back to close out the hour after this.